Hello, everybody. Welcome to Brian and our Facebook Live Spark Rental podcast. I forgot what we were called.
Having a senior moment there before your time.
Yeah. Anyway, we last week we talked about the 3 things that cost landlords money and time, and we gave suggestions on how to minimize them. This week, we're going to go over 7 signs that you are financially stable and 3 that you're not. Talk about getting out of denial. And and with that, Brian is going to, lead this whole thing and talk to us first about savings rate, right, Brian?
I am. As you guys join us, let us know where you're tuning in from, and let us know. Feel free to fire questions at us as we go. This is interactive. It's not your standard podcast or video cast where we get it all polished and recorded in advance. Do these live. We like to hear from you guys and make this a two-way street. So without further ado, first sign that you are financially stable is you have a savings rate of at least 15% of your income. Now, some people get hung up on, is that 15% of gross income or net income, take home after tax income? And that's not really the point. The point is that you have a target savings rate and that you stick with it every month, that you pull that savings rate out of your paycheck on the very first, every time that you get paid. So it's not, whatever's left over at the end of the month, that's what I'll throw towards savings. It's no, every payday, a certain percentage of the money gets peeled right off the top and goes into your savings account or into your investments or wherever it is that is set aside for building wealth and not for spending.
And your mindset needs to be happy about that. I know that often we look at it as like, that's less that we can, buy dumb stuff usually. But really, it's paying yourself and it's paying towards freedom. So, and isn't it true that a lot of financial experts say 10%, but that's not very much?
Well, I mean, look, the average American sets aside between 5 and 10% of their paycheck in savings. We're not here to talk to the average American, right? Like we're here to talk to people who are excited about building wealth, building passive income, reaching financial independence, potentially retiring early. So, we're not here talking to the average American. We're talking to people who are enthusiastic about building their wealth and creating their perfect life. So you need to save more than what the average American is doing if you want to do that. So bare minimum 15%, preferably way higher. I mean, because the higher your savings rate, the faster you build wealth and the faster you can build passive income. So this is really the key to reaching financial independence or retiring in a very short time horizon. It's all about savings rate. So you need to design your budget around your savings rate, not around your expenses. That's where the average American goes wrong, is they list out all their expenses and say, here are my expenses. So this part that's left over, that's what I can potentially save. That's not how I go about my budget. My budget starts with the savings rate, and that money immediately goes off the table. It's not available. And then I plan my spending around what's left. So
and there are automated
to start there.
Tools all over the place to do this. So it's out of your face before you even have a chance to do anything with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you invest through a robo-advisor, you can set up automatic transfers from your checking account to your robo-advising account. You can use tools like Acorns to automate some of those savings each month as well. Or you can just set up recurring ACH transfers between your checking account and your savings account. And however you want to go about it, it's the nuts and bolts of how you do it are less important than the fact that you do it. You have a plan, you're on top of it.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, like so much else in personal finance, a lot of it comes down to how you think about money, not about the nuts and bolts of it. So, and we do, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about savings rate, you have a pretty comprehensive article about it and some tips to boost it. I'll link to that there in the comments. All right. Second sign that you are financially stable is having an emergency fund. Should be bare minimum 1 month's expenses, preferably more. So here's how I look at emergency fund. People with very stable incomes and very stable monthly expenses can get away with a smaller emergency fund in the 1 to 3 months worth of expenses range. People with more variable living expenses or more variable monthly incomes, for example, self-employed people, people who have a small business, sometimes their income is bounces all over the place. So depending on your income and your expenses, if it's more variable, aim for more like 4 to 6 months at least worth of expenses in your emergency fund. But it does vary. Personal finance is personal, right? I mean, it's not, the rules aren't exactly the same for every single person. So just as a crude rule of thumb, 1 to 3 months worth of expenses for very, very stable, like W-2 employee kind of people with super stable expenses, 4 to 6 months or even more worth of expenses for people with more variable expenses and income. And, like with savings rate, the first step is simply knowing your numbers.
Right.
What are your monthly expenses? How many months of expenses do you have set aside currently? If you don't have a pretty ready answer to that question, then you don't meet this this sign, right? I mean,
right. Not to mention writing stuff down, which includes a budget and whatever you want. It's just proven that when you write it down, you tend to keep to it more.
100%. Have this stuff mapped out, whether that's in a spreadsheet, if you're a spreadsheet nerd like I am, or you can use tools like, I like mint.com, for example. It's a free tool where you can assemble all of your accounts and see your net worth laid out in one simple place, and it'll connect to your accounts automatically and auto update those for you. So however you do it, again, it's not about the exact nuts and bolts of how you do it. It's more that you do it in the first place and that you're aware of these things and that you're on top of it.
Right. Now, what about emergencies? Because they happen, we get sick or, other things. What do you suggest for that?
Well, absolutely. So having an emergency fund is, of course, one step toward that. But the third item here, like you said, Denny, is having protections in place for your health and for health emergencies moving forward. And that impacts on your ability to earn. Because in some ways, we are each our own best asset because we are how we earn money, right? I mean, the ability to earn an income is our greatest asset, at least until we reach financial independence. And then we don't need to actively earn an income because our investments do that for us. But so first things first, you need adequate health insurance. I mean, everyone needs adequate health insurance, no matter what. Now, what adequate means to you is different for every person. A single person who's in their 20s and super fit and healthy, they can get away with having, a super high deductible insurance policy, which is really just like a doomsday health insurance policy, and combining that with like an HSA, which is, by the way, offers the best tax advantages of any tax sheltered account. Super big on HSAs. If you are in your late 40s and married and have 6 children, you probably need a more comprehensive health insurance plan. I mean, this is just what it is. Or if you're older, you might need a comprehensive health insurance plan than a person who's young and single and fit who can get away with that super high deductible plan. Once again, adequate, that definition varies from person to person. But if you do have a high deductible plan, make sure you do have either an HSA or some other kind of sufficient cash reserve to cover that deductible each year in case the worst happens and you do have a true health emergency and you hit that deductible. You got to pay all that high money out of pocket.
Right.
All right, so health insurance is one part of that. Long-term disability insurance, also important, because if you get badly injured and can no longer work, then you're in trouble. Your family is in trouble. And this is especially true for families who rely on one earner in particular, so like single earner households, or even if both partners work, but one of them earns way more than the other. Long-term disability insurance, super important. Same concept here, life insurance, it's just two sides of the same coin, right? Long-term disability versus death, but either way, you lose the ability to earn money and your family loses out on your income. So,
and you would be surprised at how many people don't even take that into consideration. And then
right.
somebody is left in the loop.
And, it depends. Right. So it depends on your personal situation too. Young single person, no kids, you probably don't need life insurance or long-term. Well, you may still need long-term disability insurance just to be alive, but still be having to spend money. But you probably don't need life insurance if you're 25 and single and don't have kids. If you are 45 and married with the 6 kids and your partner doesn't work, you probably need life insurance. Unless, of course, you are following the FIRE lifestyle. Denny, we talked about this a month or two back, some of the hidden benefits of the FIRE lifestyle. And one of them is if you have a super high savings rate and you've built up a pretty strong portfolio of income producing assets, you may not need long-term disability insurance or life insurance, because even if the higher earner dies, the family could still potentially be okay based on their low living expenses, high net worth, and strong passive income.
Right.
So, I don't want to overstate that point, because, that can be easy to overstate, but we do go into a little bit more detail about that in an article, which I'll pass along in the comments there as well. All right, speaking of FIRE, financial independence, retiring early, the 4th sign of financial stability is knowing either your FI date or your retirement date, either way, and the amount that you need to reach financial independence or to retire. You have to know your numbers. So this means setting targets for your monthly spending and knowing how much of a nest egg or how many income producing assets you need to cover those target living expenses each month. Right?
And so, how do you have tips on how one would get to those numbers besides, taking your budget?
Yes, that's a pretty lengthy conversation in itself, getting into safe withdrawal rates if you're looking at like stocks and bonds. But, and we actually do have an article breaking down safe withdrawal rates and how real estate kind of changes some of the math on that. I don't have that link handy to pass along here. But I'll just keep it super simple for right now and say, if you can earn $500 a month cash flow from a rental property, then how many of those rental properties do you need to cover your living expenses, right? And what's your time horizon to build that portfolio of rental properties, right? Because it's really not about the target nest egg or the target net worth. It's really about creating that income. So building enough passive investment income to cover your target monthly living expenses. So when you do that, you reach financial independence and working becomes optional. But you should have a target date for that, and you should have a target amount for that.
Absolutely. And we talked about, let's talk about, I'm jumping right to the spouse being, let's get the spouse on board, but let's slow it down a little bit. Let's talk about asset allocation, which basically is everywhere. That's my way of putting it, but Brian will put it better.
Well, so 5th sign of financial stability here is that you know your target asset allocation and you know your current asset allocation. Because there's probably 2 different things, the ideal versus the reality of where you are right now. So asset allocation is, it's a fancy financial term that just means the percentage of your different assets in your portfolio, all of your different investments, that are in each different asset class. So for example, I aim for a target of around 40% of my investments being in stocks, around 40% of my investments being in direct real estate ownership, like rental properties, and about 20% of my asset allocation being in indirect real estate investments. So things like private REITs, private notes, that sort of thing. Now, the reality is different from that target. My reality right now, I have way more in stocks than I want and way less in rental properties than I want. But that's okay. You just need to know your target asset allocation and your current asset allocation and have a plan for bridging the gap between the ideal and the reality, right? Now, how do you know what kind of asset allocation you want? Again, super personal. It varies based on your age, based on your how conservative you are financially. It
Tolerance
varies.
for risk.
Exactly. There's a million, and how much you like real estate, for example. I mean, Denny, you and I are real estate people. Not everyone is.
Right.
It just, it varies now, and that's a whole conversation in itself. If you are totally new to this and you need help, talk to a financial advisor, because they can at least give you a starting point for this. But I'll give you one quick rule of thumb, the old rule of thumb for asset allocation. And that was the rule of 100, which is subtract your age from 100. And that's how much money you should have in stocks. Nowadays, it's more like the rule of 110 or 120, because bonds don't pay very well and because people are living longer. So try that. It's just a super blunt rule of thumb. Subtract your age from 120. That's how much you should have in stocks, theoretically. Again, speak to a professional and invest a little more time in this. But.
Absolutely.
All right. The sixth sign that you are financially stable is that every year you grow your passive income. So Denny and I, you've heard us talk about passive income in this broadcast right here. We talk about it all the time in other broadcasts, in our articles, all over the place. We're all about passive income, because with enough passive income, you don't need to work anymore and you reach financial independence. You can go do whatever you want, whether that's spending more time with your family, whether it's traveling more, whether it's quitting your high stress, high octane job and going off and doing something that you're passionate about, whether it's volunteering full time, whatever it is. When you no longer have to go out and work for your money that you need to live on, you're golden. You are free. You can do whatever you want with the rest of your life. So
and it makes life happier when you don't have to have those Monday blues. So gotta go to work.
Well, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you don't have to work for money, you work for fun and for fulfillment. So your life becomes, not about, the drudgery of trying to make ends meet. It's about doing what is meaningful to you. So here's what you got to do for passive income. You should be tracking what we call your FIRE ratio every month. That is the percentage of your living expenses that you can cover with your passive income from investments. So super easy and quick example. Let's say that your monthly living expenses are $5,000 and you have $1,000 currently coming in passive income, whether it's rental properties or dividends from stocks or whatever. So you spend $5,000 a month, you earn $1,000 a month in passive income, you have a 20% FIRE ratio. That's simple. Right? You can cover 20% of your monthly living expenses with your passive income. Nice. When that FIRE ratio reaches 100%, you've reached financial independence. So, congratulations.
Pull out the champagne.
Exactly. All right. So, Denny, you jumped ahead here to number 7, the seventh sign of financial stability. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, I have to, there are people, I have a couple friends actually who have grown up in families where they worked at the same company and they retired at the same company. And then they're with a spouse who is an entrepreneur and is trying this and trying that. And I've seen it clash. So that can be a little hard for, that difference. So I know we talked about this before and how to bring your spouse on board. But what if you're like that opposite, on that opposite end? Can you do it on your own without a spouse?
Not really. Not if you're married. So the seven, as Denny alluded to here, the seventh sign of financial stability is that your spouse enthusiastically shares your financial goals and financial vision. If you are not perfectly aligned with your spouse, then you're going to be pulling in opposite directions here financially, and you're going to end up canceling each other out and not making any progress. Because while one of you is trying to set aside a whole bunch of money for savings and investments, the other one is running around spending that money. So you need to have your spouse on board, not reluctantly, but enthusiastically sharing your financial goals and vision.
So you want to talk about this when you're dating.
Yes, yes, you do. And look, I've had personal experiences with this with my wife. It took years for my wife and I to get on the same page financially. We finally are now. mostly. Say we're 95% or 90, maybe even 99% on the same page financially, which is enough. But for years, we had a very different vision. I mean, she wanted to spend, to live large. I wanted to save, and invest and build passive income. And, we clashed. And, it took a series of compromises and many conversations over many bottles of wine to get to the same place financially. So, this is something that we talked about in detail just a couple weeks ago. We also have an article on it. If you guys missed that episode, and we'll share a link to that here as well. But super important, if you're married or have a life partner that you live with or whatever, super important that you share the same financial vision and goals. So
absolutely,
make sure you're on the same page. All right, Denny, what are some signs that you are not financially stable?
Well, if you are looking at your Credit Karma report and you see balances on every single one of your credit cards that are pretty high, that's a good sign that you're not in the good direction there.
Yeah, or really, carrying any credit card debt is a bad sign. You don't want to be carrying any credit card debt month to month. Like, by all means, have a credit card, take advantage of the points, use those points to travel. I'm all about it. But at the end of every single month, pay off your balances in full.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. And even a lot of time people think because you have new credit or you're getting credit new, that you go, charge and it builds it, but you don't want to do that. That's quite the opposite of what you should be doing.
No, pay it in full every single month.
Yes. Because
otherwise you'll get hit with heavy interest. And if you carry more than 30% of any given card's available balance, then it hurts your credit. So, and the same also goes for other unsecured debts like personal loans. Anything that's an expensive, high interest, unsecured debt that is making you poorer every month, not richer.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily true of secured debts. The best example of that is a rental property that has a mortgage on it, but the rental property still generates cash flow every month. That mortgage is not a problem because you're earning money on that asset every month, despite the mortgage. Credit card debt, that just makes you poorer. So
right, absolutely. You also need to keep your eyes open. You do need a budget. Everybody, whether you want to be financially secure or not, everybody needs a budget. Otherwise you're never going to attain the goals of financial security, and you're probably going to end up the other way. So you have to keep track of your spending.
Yeah. And, keep in mind that we use the word budget here a little bit loosely. Everyone has their own approach to budgeting multiple approaches to budgeting can work. You can have the traditional spreadsheet approach that is super detailed, so what my wife and I do, we live on her salary and all of my income, we save and invest. So we just need to make sure that at the end of each month, we haven't spent any more than my wife earns, which, we typically, we don't. So, whatever, so it can be informal like that, but you have to have some form of budgeting. How you approach it is up to you, but you have to have something. And it needs to be a system that consistently meets that target savings rate of yours. That's the litmus test of whether your budget works, is whether you, every single month, get that target savings rate into your investments.
And build in the things that we all have something that we might really, really want. It's not necessarily a need, but build it into the budget then, because otherwise you're going to stray off it anyway. Oh,
every budget should have discretionary spending in there. Right. We're not monks, right? We want to live. So yes. Build in discretionary.
You don't have to live on cup of noodle and water. And
exactly. All right, Jenny, what's the third sign? Sorry.
The last one is if you're not keeping an eye on your net worth. So you should pretty much have a good idea of what your portfolio is looking like. So if somebody asks, you should be able to go, psh, that's it. Instead of wait, I have to check this out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Christina Colin, who she's been following along in the comments, and brought Dan Basley on here to join us as well, and said, it's not just enough to have the budget, you actually have to follow the budget too, which is a great point, Christina. Thank you for pointing that out there, because a lot of people have a budget but don't necessarily stick to it every month. So so they say, oh, I'm fine, I have a budget, but if you blow your budget every month, then why bother having a budget at all?
Seriously.
So like Denny said, third and final one is tracking your net worth. You should have a sense for your net worth at any given moment. It doesn't need to be to the penny. I mean, if you own stocks, for example, they're bouncing all over the place every day.
All right.
But you should have a sense of your net worth, and you should every single month at least take a look at your net worth to see how it's changed. And once again, check out mint.com as a free resource to help you automate tracking your net worth.
Right. So there's really no reason anymore. I mean, back in my day, everything wasn't as available. So that was a big excuse, but now there's no excuse.
It's easier than ever before to be fiscally responsible, to save money, to invest your money and diversify your investments. So no excuses. I mean, it's easier than ever before.
Absolutely.
Denny, is there anything else that you want to add here before we call this episode complete?
No, Brian, I think that you have covered it all.
A
touchy subject too, but you have covered it all.
Well, I certainly ran my mouth enough, but you guys, let us know what you want to hear about next week. This is, again, all about you, not us. So, shoot us a message over Facebook or reach out to us through our website. Let us know what kind of topics you want to hear us talk about in the weeks to come. And I promise, Denny and I actually read those ourselves. It's not delegated to like a minion somewhere. We're here for you guys. It's all about you. So, absolutely. And we do have one final thought that Christina wanted to add here. She says, it's so funny, back in 2004, when I bought my multifamily, I did not have savings and I knew nothing about cap rates. But, you are in a very different place now, I'm guessing, Christina. She says, sometimes I feel the more I know, the less risk I take. But, to put a little twist on that, Christina, the more you know, the more intelligent your risks become, right? The more calculated those risks become. So you can, it's not that you don't take any risks, it's that you take calculated risks because you know enough to be able to calculate what is the risk return ratio on this investment, and to only buy investments where you feel that the risk is low and the return is high. So, and
there are no mistakes if you're learning by them.
That's right. They're not called mistakes. It's called tuition. So,
there you go.
And Edwin Torres says there's great advice. Learning a lot from this group. Edwin, we appreciate that. So you guys, thank you so much for joining us today. We'll see you next Tuesday. We broadcast this podcast and video series live every Tuesday, 2:00 Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. And Stacey Hester says, just getting started, trying to learn from the pros. Well, we appreciate you joining us here, Stacey, and hopefully we qualify as the pros.
Or at least ones who made mistakes and paid tuition.
Yes, I've paid a lot of that tuition over the years. I've made a lot of those expensive mistakes. All right, you guys, we'll see you next Tuesday, and have a great week. Reach out and let us know what you want to hear about next week. We'll see you then.
Bye-bye.